Ladies and gentlemen, this is our monthly groupie video. Just putting the world to rights, really. We've got Ben. Ben, are you Ben or Benjamin?
Either or, whatever's easier.
Okay, and we've got Karis. Karis, you are from Branching Out. You did that video ages ago, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, are we ever going to be able to share that?
It is doing the festival rounds at the minute, but when it's finished, it should be able to be shared. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Karis, tell us about Branching Out.
It was this short film about men's mental health, which is how I got in contact with Dan.
Okay.
And it was bloody good, actually. It was students, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were like young.
There we go. So I think that's what I'd like to do the topics, really, because yeah, we focus on men's mental health, and I've got big concerns. Let me close that door. I've got big concerns that we're ignoring dramatic word. I'm going to stick with it. We're ignoring or we're forgetting about the next generation of youths, students, and the younger generation. The reason being is, how long was the lockdowns? 18 months, 2 years, realistically?
Yeah, 18 months or so, I suppose. Yeah, well, yeah.
Do you get what I mean? So we've basically taken 2 years of life away from the younger generation, and we've got the teacher strikes. Don't get me wrong, I totally and utterly agree with the teacher strikes. I really do. But the consequence of that, the younger generation are missing out on a lot of their...
It's very disruptive on their educational program, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The whole thing.
Yeah, but it's also causing a knock-on
social as well.
Sorry, I didn't...
Social as well, yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And I just think it's a hard one. And I was in a shop the other day, and so I presume they're a parent, and they're like, "Why?" They're talking to their teenagers, like, "Why are you so stupid? What's wrong with you?" And all this kind of stuff. It's like, we've stolen arguably 3 years of that person's life. Let's cut them a little bit of slack.
Mm.
I feel like you're going to bubble up and say something, Steve.
Me? No. I'm listening intently.
Yeah,
it's not. I mean, I totally agree with you in the fact that I mean, those 2 or 3 years when you're 18, that's a huge percentage of your life.
Yeah,
isn't it? Really, a very informative period of time. Where you're growing, developing. Whether that's relationships or a skill or educational or whatever. You've missed out on a massive chunk of your life at that point.
But do you think we're actually being proactive of trying to get them out of their shells? Because let's face it, like anxiety, and I've spoken to schools and one university as well, like anxiety in those age groups is massively, it's just coming out. And it's unbeatable. They just can't keep on top of it. And the problem seems to be getting worse and worse. I just think that, no, as you know, like I've stood in front of schools. Phil's done 1 or 2 with me as well. Are we...
I don't think it's naturally like that binary, though, is it? Because like through history, different age groups have gone through different traumas. Yeah, okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, but you look at like 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds joining the army in World War II and going through some of the things that they did during the formative years of their life, compared to stay at home for 2 to 3 years to play computer games during the formative years of your life. I don't think it's necessarily just that one variable that's impacted the increased amount of anxiety and pressures that youngsters are feeling. Because on the flip side of the argument, I genuinely feel in my experience that it is the younger generation that are more aware of mental health and are probably a lot more vocal and comfortable being more vocal and expressive with social issues than perhaps even the older generations are. Now, the flip side of that is that they might not necessarily have the access to the support or the coping mechanisms, that you learn through life on that fact. But I don't think it's necessarily binary. It's an interesting one because, there was an article the other day, what was it, on the BBC or something like, almost 500 or 600 million pounds worth of support tutoring money has not been spent, which was earmarked by the government to be able to help students that obviously were struggling during lockdown, and how they're trying to support them through the education process of that. And even schools are struggling to be able to even access and spend that money to be able to support the students.
Well, that depends on how accessible they're actually going to make it. If you've got to jump through 3 million hoops to get it, People will just give up after 150 hoops, won't they?
Yeah.
Forget it.
So it's such a broad subject, isn't it? It's because like you see like youth services massively underfunded at the moment. Youth centres and opportunities for activities and extra vocational activities and things are not as funded as they were. They're being closed down left, right, and centre. They don't have as much support. But equally, I do see that the youngsters are probably more vocal about social issues and mental health and anxiety and depression and things like that than perhaps even the older generations are.
I think sorry, who was going
No,
to
go, Ben, go.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, this is where I'm going to slightly try and disagree with Dan slightly. I don't think that we're necessarily ignoring it. I just think that we're becoming slightly more naive to sort of pay closer attention to it. I mean, from someone slightly younger than you, I'm hoping. But through my sort of educational years, there was minor sort of processes in place to try and help with things that I had that was going on at home. And I'll be honest, they were absolutely atrocious. It was a matter of trying to get somebody to sit in front of you and just try and ask you a few questions about what is actually going on. But obviously, they were limited in terms of what they can and can't ask you. And it all just seemed like it was a very, very quick turnaround job that they wanted. They just wanted to try and sort out your problems and your issues within literally a couple of weeks, where, speaking with Dan, these things could be years of stemming from a particular lifestyle or, a growing up or whatever, et cetera, et cetera.
Box ticking, do you think, Ben?
Yeah,
box ticking exercise.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've done that. Check it off. Carry on.
And I think it almost seems, even nowadays, I feel like it's just it's an AI generated sort of, oh, okay, that's that. Well, this is what we're going to do to try and sort it out. It doesn't seem to be tailored to anybody anymore. It just seems to be, right, it's mental health. Well, this criteria fits everybody, but that's obviously not the case, is it? So I just think we're being a little bit more naive towards, like you said, the younger generation now, who I do feel have a better understanding of things that they might be going through and do pay a bit more closer attention to what is currently happening at home. Because let's be honest, that's, I could be wrong for saying this, but that's probably where a lot of it's going to stem from, because they're in their younger years. So it's either going to be social, or it's going to be, family related or home orientated or something like that. But yeah, like I said, I just don't feel like there's an appropriate outlet that's tailored to individuals for that. Like you said, maybe the funding's not been, put into the right places. I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree with that massively. I think it's an overgeneralized thing in the sense that people will go, oh, it's mental health. We'll treat it like as a general thing instead of you're an individual. We'll treat it as an individual thing. It's not very tailored, like you said.
Do you still work with students? Because I keep presuming you're a student. You're not a student anymore, are you?
I'm in my second year of uni.
And how's the topic of mental health in the uni as you're in the trenches?
I don't really know. I've not really heard a lot about it. I think definitely more could be done. My uni's online at Open Uni, so it kind of that was the best one for me to kind of alleviate the social anxiety that I had. So that was, but I feel like there is more still to be done in universities. I think definitely with anxiety and mental health, with exams and socializing and all different things like that. I think there still needs to be more in place.
Such as, I'm gonna put you on the spot now, but
I think just things like maybe just more sort of groups or like places we can go to and actually speak up and say, actually, this isn't working. Is there a way that we can tweak this to how people could feel slightly better in themselves? Is there ways that we can not have to over explain everything? My problem in life is constantly having to justify why I feel like something's not right. And I feel like that's where it gets like, oh, I'm not going to bother saying anything because I don't have to justify it. And then you don't feel so sort of alone or like something's wrong with you.
So that's the other party, really, the person that you're speaking to. That's the other party really not having an understanding of mental health and how it can be so varied. Like you say, they're just putting it all under this, in this one pot of general mental health. So it just seems to me that the other person, so it's, maybe you need, or maybe they need to supply, sorry, not you need, but they need to supply
dedicated,
dedicated, or people that really have a firm grip on how far reaching, you know, all this kind of topics can be, you know, and the fact that somebody has problems with their mental health, that could be any one of a million different things that's causing that.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think I've said this before, and I'll ask a question again. It's an open question. Are we just wasting our time? And the reason being is all we're doing is
Who's we?
us, all the mental health charities, because we're all focused on the adults.
It's one of those weird things, isn't it? Sorry, I keep butting in.
No,
Do Ben? No, it's about you, man.
I'll raise a hand.
Steve does it all the time. Go on.
It's don't get me wrong. There are often days where you do sort of feel like you're wasting your breath, etc., and I do understand that. But it's one of those things, isn't it? And I've said it before. I don't know if I said it to Dan previously, but it's mental health. It kind of reminds me of sort of, you know, this is going to sound like a really, really weird abbreviation, but you know, the reason we have laws is to stop things happening, right? If you know you can't go out and murder somebody because that's against the law. The reason we have laws is because that does happen. Mental illness is very, very much the same thing. It's always going to happen. There's always going to be two sides of the people that don't listen to it, which, you know, the people that don't necessarily abide by the law. And there are going to be people like us who want to try and bring sort of awareness and sort of exposure to it. You're not going to please everyone. It's always going to happen. So there's always going to be that sense of, are you wasting your time? And that's, you know, you can't change everybody's life either, unfortunately, regardless of how many people that, you know, the five of us speak to, or, you know, no matter how many posts we put up on LinkedIn, whatever it is, you know, you're going to get a lot of engagement out of it. Yes, you might get 5 or 6 people out of 10, you know, engage with you and try and speak to you about it. But there's always going to be the people that are just push it to the side or don't bother. And we don't know we don't know what the final conclusion or result of that person is going to be, whether they do take their own life or whatever it's going to be. So it's difficult, isn't it? Because we're so hard set on trying to make some sort of difference and trying to help people, but you're just not going to be able to please everybody. And it's a very, very difficult question, because you think, well, what more can I do? You know, if people are ignoring it and there's not enough people doing it, so why are we doing it?
Yeah.
So it's.
I think, Dan, sorry, Ben, carry on.
No, it's all right. No, it's all right. Go on.
I think in answer to your question, Dan, you've only got to look at one kind of our attitude is to, do people think it's right or do people not think it's right? As a charity, don't care.
Yeah.
You know, two, you know, you've only got to look at the followings and the messages that we get from Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, you know, all of these social channels that we put out on, you know, which we've done with really no, you know, I mean, there is a strategy behind it now, but at the time there was no strategy behind it. You know, we were just throwing up videos and people were latching onto them, and people were following the page and all the rest of it. Well, surely that gives you the answer that you need. You know, I mean, we've got 7,800 followers or whatever on Facebook now. It's mental. Literally.
Let me rephrase then. Are we only educating this generation? Let's say the working people upwards.
Caris, go.
I was actually going to throw it in a different direction and say that I don't think it's a waste of time. I think people just, when they grow up, whether it be 18 or 16 or way in their 20s or 30s, I think that's when people start to feel, oh, something might be under the surface and I might want to go and look at that and reflect on it and then realize that it's mental health or any other sort of thing going on in their life. I don't think it's a sense of, oh, I'm wasting my time because young people aren't getting taught enough. I think it is a sense of, you really need to sort of, as an individual, look at yourself and think, is it mental health or is it something else? Because usually it could stem from something younger in life that you've just suppressed and ignored, and then hit 20 or 30 and gone, oh, that's coming out in the wrong way, which I think that happened for me when I was like really young. Loads of bad stuff happened, and then it was like, oh, now I'm older and I know myself more. That's, you know, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does actually. And I suppose, to my mind, I wonder whether it's not about whether we're dealing with the older generation or the mid generation or the younger generation right now, you know, and whether we're doing that. We're at a period of time now where everybody, regardless of age, is going through mental health awareness. You know, it's now, in the last 10 years, I suppose, become far more of a thing. I mean, going back to Phil's original thing, you know, with where we were you know, punting chaps off to, you know, fight in the Second World War at the age of 16, 17, 18. Look at the shit that fell out of that.
Mm.
I mean, you know, but it was shell shock. And everybody just went, oh, you know, poor bloke, you know, he's got shell shock, you know, a loud bang goes off and he hides under the table. You know, but we don't deal with that stuff like that any longer.
Mm.
You know, you try and you know the veterans are going to come back. They're going to have PTSD. They're going to have anxiety, stuff like that, and they manage it better. So I just think we're getting to manage stuff better. But I don't think that's a generational thing. I think that's a period of time thing. You know, since the year 2000, 2010, you know, or whatever, we've become a lot more socially accepting of mental health issues. No.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm listening, as you know, I'm a processor. I think the tipping point was when Robin Williams died. I think that was the tip. That was because nobody saw that coming.
No.
And that,
But
and
I
even funny enough, even to this day, I can't watch any of his films because it generally makes me sad. No, I don't know. I think for me that maybe that's just my perspective, but for me that was a tipping point. We've got a problem.
Did you not think people were neglecting the signs? Because I mean, and the only reason I say that is because, like you've just said with Robin Williams, Chester Bennington, obviously Linkin Park, you know, a band that I grew up listening to from such an early age, and that didn't come to a shock to me when I heard, because if you look at so many interviews that the guy had done and so many conversations that he'd had with people, you know, the guy was basically crying out for help from a lot of people. And there are some interviews that he'd done on air with radio stations, and you know, the guys, when he was openly expressing himself and telling them like his head is a very, very dark place to be in, and you know, he hates being in there by himself, etc., etc. And you've got a guy that's standing behind a microphone, you know, laughing and smiling, like not taking it seriously enough.
Yeah.
And that's when I sort of realised, I thought, well, you know, are people not paying attention to it? You know, is it a matter of they think it's cry wolf? You know, because so many people are maybe being more open, like you said about mental health now, maybe people aren't paying attention to it as much as they should be because so many more people are coming and being a bit more open about it. I just think, I know it's a bad way to put it, but I can't really think of another way to word it.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to put it, if I'm honest with you. I think we only want to. I think as a society, I think we only look for stuff to be entertained, and we've got blinkers on everything else. So like the LinkedIn part. I remember all of that story. Like I didn't see one interview of where people are like, "Oh, so what's going on with this guy?" Is that the same as was it Will Smith when he hit whatever his name was?
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough, he shouldn't have done that, but everyone was like, "Oh, why?" No one asked why he did that.
No,
it was just so entertaining for absolutely everybody. It was like, was it Chris Rock who he slapped?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And all that, and everyone was so focused on that and the beef and what's going to happen next. It was like, actually, why did he do that? He shouldn't have done it. I think he later on admitted that. But why did he do that? What's going on? Because arguably, Will Smith is what the original cool guy on television, arguably, and all this kind of stuff.
Arguably, yeah.
Yeah, so it just wasn't in his character, but everyone just wants to be entertained by it, and I think that's the problem with all social media, isn't it? We just got our blinkers on. We're sponges. We just want
tunnel vision.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's funny because somebody put. It's one of my friends, Phil. I won't say on here, Phil. I believe you're a friend of mine. I'll WhatsApp you later. He put he's normally really, really chirpy, but he put something a little bit concerning. His engagement on all of his funny posts is normally up there, like 15, 20 likes, literally consistent in a few comments. But he put something on there. I was like, shit, that's not like you. Two comments.
And what did those comments consist of? Are you are you okay, mate? I mean, were they actually showing concern?
Yeah, no, there was like a couple of comments and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think where I'm going with this one is just I've it's always on the top of my newsfeed for some weird reason, but literally every post is like, comments, blah blah blah, and some sort of engagement. That one, 0, or only a couple. And I think it is. I don't know. Are we choosing to ignore it, or do we not know how to approach it?
I don't think we know how to approach it, really. You know, it's very easy to like or laugh at a cat running up the curtains, or you know, all this kind of crap that they put on there, which is entertaining. You know, but if somebody then puts something serious, I mean, I've seen it even with, I don't make political comments really, but you know, sometimes something really jars me, and where I might get 40, 50 laughs or likes for something I've done with the dogs, you know, I might get 2 or 3, because people look at it and go, shit, he's being serious. I don't know that I can cope with this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
Did
think
you-
people are quick to, oh, sorry.
No,
Go on, Carrie.
I was just going to say, I think people are quick, very, very quick to forget. My case goes back to Caroline Flack and Jason David Frank. They both, I think, were 2 cases where I was shocked that they took their own life, because I was not expecting it. And everyone was very quick to be like, be kind, you don't know what people are going through. And then within like 2-3 weeks, everyone was back to, you know, just being, you know,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, agree. Completely agree.
Well, we'll be interested to see what happens, because was it May when she took her life? It's around now, isn't it? Because I remember when that happened, and everyone hashtag be kind, and everyone was putting bloody Facebook covers and all this kind of stuff. But now that was that must be 3 years ago now, wasn't it?
I think a vast majority of people that do that though are just following the crowd. I don't think half of them even understand the whole meaning behind it.
That's the big thing.
Completely agree.
Yeah, and I think that's one reason why, as a charity, we don't really, obviously we support weeks and dedicated days, but we don't really post about it on MANUP at all, because we just find that most people doing it, it's just pity sharing. They just want to fit in.
Yeah, they just want other people. They care more about what other people think they're doing than what they're actually doing themselves, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Phil, you've been very quiet there. I know you know.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I was going to say, he looks very pensive.
No, it does.
No, there was just meandering through all those points. As you know, I kind of overanalyze everything. So I think there was a few kind of points to touch on, which, like your first point about are we concentrating on the adults more than the younger generations? And I think that's an interesting one, because I think that there's a lot that the adults can learn from the younger generations, because they do tend to be more socially aware and critical and open to having those kind of awkward conversations, where the older generations are often more apprehensive to change and considering other points of view. But then the other side of that, the benefit is actually, because we are seeing more conversations happening around this broad spectrum of topics, which ultimately comes back to, you know, you're an all singing, all dancing meat puppet, you know, with a spirit inside it, and you're all programmed differently and you deal with things differently. But fundamentally, it comes down to it's okay to not be okay. And the more people that see those conversations happening, the more benefit it is. And in the same respect to Karis's point about, you know, some people are happy to go and have a conversation, you know, openly put their heart on their sleeve and talk about these difficult situations. But some people just aren't wired that way as well. And again, it's a spectrum. It's those introverts that don't want to share it. And the benefit that they get of people having these open conversations is the fact that they might not necessarily be a voice in the conversation, but it's still as benefit for them to know that others are struggling, which then leads to the point about Robin Williams and Chester Bennington, and the fact that, again, it's a spectrum of how people deal with that. You know, people all around Robin Williams wouldn't have seen it. But in retrospect, you had Billy Connolly, one of his oldest friends, who kind of saw some of the signs around it. And I think he did an interview once where he said there was a telephone call that he had from Robin Williams 2 days before they met for lunch or something. And he kind of felt in retrospect that actually that was like a goodbye note to him, because he kind of saw the signs there. But equally, Robin Williams' way of dealing with his own kind of demons was to try and bring joy into other people's lives. Yeah. Whereas then, you know, with Chester, it was, you know, maybe it's more difficult to see because he was a bit of a darker soul with that. But you've only got to listen to every single bloody song he wrote. Every single song by Linkin Park is an absolute, you know, ode to mental health. Yeah, you know, I grew up with it too. You know, so it's kind of an interesting one, respecting the fact that it is a spectrum of how people deal with things, compartmentalize things. So are we necessarily, as a charity with MANUP, we focus on the adult side of things. But again, we've got youngsters from, what was it, Farlingay High School. Mm-hmm. It was the youngsters that initiated that conversation and spoke to their teachers and tutors to say, we want these guys to come in and kind of talk around it. They're the ones that are initiating the change. So I think it's beneficial on both points. I don't think it's as binary necessarily as just going, you know, one or the other.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'd agree with that one. Absolutely. And well done on the new word. Your word of the day is binary today.
I'm working with my software development company, so it has to be.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Ben?
He's gonna go on to letters beginning with C next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, several pluses.
Yeah.
Have you got any thoughts on that, Ben, before we draw?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it again. There's quite a lot to process, and for me, based on what we're saying, it sounds like we're just as human beings, we struggle to approach others, or we don't know how to necessarily deal with it when someone else might be going through something. I think that's. I'm just trying to think about it now because I'm thinking to myself with the likes of Robin Williams and Chester Bennington, if you were two people that were there that were in his inner circle, and regardless whether you picked up on signs or not, but you might have spotted an off day that you might be having, would it be, because normally if someone's having an off day, your simple thing is to be like, oh, Dan, you're all right, you seem a bit off today. You might turn around and go, yeah, just not really feeling myself. 90% of people will go, oh, right, okay, yeah, he's just having a shit day. So they might not sort of dive in deeper, if you like, and try and pick your brain about it. But then again, I'm looking at it from the point of, if I do dive in and I go, right, Dan, what's going on? Something's clearly wrong. You really, really don't see yourself today. You might go, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Just leave it. So it's like with 2 points of the story, isn't it? You go, well, how do I approach you if you're not letting me in? And you've got to think about it on the fact of, right, well, do I actually want to talk to this person about it? So it's like, I feel like two people are meeting in the middle, but they're not actually getting anywhere. It's just like a stalemate. So it's not, so it's actually a bit more of an eye opener to me, actually, because I feel like now it's weird I'm even saying this, but we're not necessarily trying to reach out to other people that do have mental health issues or whatever it might be, but the people that actually don't have it as well, so try and engage with them to try and help them deal with it a bit better if they spot something that might be slightly off as well. With the story, it's given me quite a lot to think about. Sorry, I'm sort of like just thinking about it now in my own head while I'm trying to talk about it, so it's quite difficult.
That's an interesting perspective, actually. I think that's a good way of looking at it, isn't it? Really, but I don't know. I just think, and I've seen this many times. I think I've been like it as well. As if you see somebody having some sort of, they're just acting different. It's like we put on like a doctor or a therapist mode of like, oh, Phil, you're all right, mate. You're acting a little, something's up. Come on, give us a cuddle. And then we put on that mode of, I'm not offering you a cuddle, Phil, by the way, you know me. But it's
Now he's gutted.
Yeah,
now you're going to have to deal with the fallout of that.
No, exactly. But if it is, do you get what I mean? We put on everything else like, oh, you're right, that's fine. But the minute there's something where it might be to do with mental health or even mental illness, we go into like this weird doctor mode of all PC and stuff like that. I did a video a couple of days ago, actually. That's the guy with Michael who lost his brother in January. That was a hard video. And he said, he was like, I know I'm not qualified, but if anybody wants to reach out to me, it's like, you don't need to be qualified to be a friend. You don't need, we've all got ears. We didn't need a license for it. So some of us with our mouth we should do, maybe, but we don't need to. It goes back to what our core is, isn't it? Let's just uncomplicate the discussion about mental health. And sometimes to do that, you don't need to talk about mental health.
But it's more natural for people that have gone through something like that, or it's a familiar topic, so that they want to try and help, not necessarily fix people, because when it comes to mental health, it's not about fixing people, right? But it is about, as you say, being a friend. But I think that goes back to the other point about the social conditioning, about how people are just so uncomfortable with that topic. If they get a sense, it's not that they don't necessarily see the signs, but they're just unprepared, or unsure about how to even branch it. So it's almost safer to not. And I think that comes down to a broader socio kind of issue about people's attention spans and selfish nature now. Where it is, it's all social media is about putting on your best life. It's not about necessarily admitting to any of the bad or the challenges you're overcoming. And everything's super disposable now. So it's about that instant gratification or the fix. And I think, mental health isn't an instant fix. So if someone's going through that, it's like, if I start peeling into that, am I going to get dragged down into it? And it's like, and it becomes something that they want to shy away from. You almost want to pretend it doesn't happen. So
people can just slide up. And it goes away.
Well, this is it. Exactly.
It's off screen.
Someone else will deal with that. It's fine.
Yeah. That's wrong. So just before George closes, let's flip it on. Let's flip it on its head. It's going to be a hard one. Phil, if you see someone you're like, they're acting weird or different, whatever terminology, how would you approach them?
It's difficult because I'm normally the one that acts weird.
No comment.
Uh, Typically, I'll just reach out to people, but this relates to the point where you mentioned about somebody that you saw in your feed was put something that was out of character and there was a lot of engagement there, right? But this relates to the MANUP kind of side of things, is where we don't see a lot of coalface engagement on a lot of the videos, but we see the metrics of people that are watching, interacting, and then sliding into our DMs talking about that because they don't want to be seen on the outside world as necessarily engaging or amplifying that they're having challenges themselves. So for me, it is about reaching out to people. Typically, I'll just pick up the phone and call them because I think that, you know, the message can be ignored. You know, it's fine if somebody hangs up the phone, then you know they don't want to talk or such. But I think sometimes it's just having a voice, because it's such a rare thing now. People who avoid the phone calls is often all you necessarily need, just a quick chat, just to kind of check in. But it is just discreetly reaching out. If you genuinely do care, you know, that's the first step, is talking.
Ben?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I'm a bit of a pest when it comes to things like this. Because I've had my fair share, and because, you know, I said I still deal with things now, and like I've said to Dan before in the past, it's not a matter of, and like, you know, like Phil's rightly said as well, it's not about fixing things now. You know, there are certain aspects of my mental illness where I know that there is things that I have to live with and just deal with and cope with on a daily basis. But I just prefer being relatable to people, because although everybody's situation is completely different, and I completely sympathise with that, and I understand that there are going to be certain elements of what you're going through that somebody else has also gone through, regardless whether it be just an emotion of just waking up and immediately being in a bad mood, or having a really, really bad day, and you've literally woken up out of bed 2 minutes ago and you think, well, why is that happening? It's little things like that. I try to be more relatable when I'm trying to speak to people, because I feel like people are a little bit more receptive to listen to me and to try and talk to me. And it's like I've said to Dan before, I wouldn't go and get a tattoo from a tattoo artist who's not got any tattoos on their body, because they can't relate to me more in terms of, how does that feel? You've never had any tattoos, you don't know what it feels like. How are you to tell me that feels like that and that feels like that? So because I'm somebody that does struggle with it, I prefer being the person to reach out and pester people to try and get them to talk to me as much as possible, because ultimately they're either going to take it off in the end, or they're going to get really annoyed about it to the point where they're laughing and giggling about it, and you think, yeah, do you know what? That's enough. You put a smile on their face, they're giggling, they're laughing, because you won't stop them, you won't leave them alone. It will come out eventually, but yeah, I just don't leave people alone. Basically, I just talk, as you can quite clearly see. So I just go for it.
Yeah. No, and good on you. It's good to see your inner arms have been tattooed as well.
Everything, mate. Yeah,
Pretty much. Done a proper. Which, when I had mine done it, I don't mind admitting I nearly cried.
Yeah. I wasn't a fan.
Yeah. Steve, what about you? Don't use me as a case study.
No, I think to a degree, I think I've got people that are, I would say, kind of, that I'm very close to, that I will pester. But when I see people, the husky races, I suppose, are quite a good thing, because I've got a lot of very close friends in there. I've got a lot of friends in there, and I've got a lot of people in there that I know who I wouldn't necessarily class as, close friends. But in all those cases, I think, I'm not afraid of saying, all right, mate, what, what's up? No, I think, and if they're kind of very dismissive about it, then I suppose I'll kind of follow it up a little bit, but I don't follow it up there and then.
Yeah.
I let them wander off, go and do their thing. And, you just happen to see them walking and think, I'll just intersect them, while you're walking up the same bit of trail. What's up, mate? I wouldn't say I'm necessarily very persistent, but I won't just let it go.
Yeah. It's timing, isn't it? It's pacing it out a little bit. And I think just before we move on to charity, and don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. It's just we don't need to fix people right on the spot.
No, you just need to let them know that actually, if they're feeling, if they go away and think about that for an hour, and I'm sitting by my van, with a cup of coffee and having a vape or having a burger, they should feel that they could come past and go, all right, mate, and sit down next to me and start the conversation without making a big deal and a big song and dance about it.
Karis?
I think for me, if I notice something's up, I instantly kind of just get a little twinge of fear throughout me, just because my mind goes directly to when I was at my lowest, and I was very good at hiding it. So whenever I ask, how you doing, or are you okay, and they just instantly give that defensive answer, I'm like, oh, is it like really, really bad? But the people that I do care about, I do pester a little bit. But it is kind of just a case of sitting silently and being with that person. And then if they talk, or if they just have a laugh, or you turn on the TV and watch something, you kind of know that you're there with them. And then it's, after a while, when it feels more comfortable and they feel more comfortable to kind of just be like, it's been a bit of a bad day today and this has happened, that you're kind of just there with them and you're there if they want to speak.
Yeah. Do you find, because you're clearly the youngest one out of us all, do you find?
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
A little bit, but there we go. That's stitched me right up that one. But do you find, because you're younger, do you find that it's only younger people that talk to you?
I actually find I have a lot more conversations with adults rather than people my own age.
Well, okay,
I
that's
do tend
good. Yeah, sorry, I was just intrigued there. As it's you in the trenches of the union, whatever else. It's like, why are you here? No, so I think our work here is done, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's good. As ever, I think the overriding message is talk, and if people don't talk, persist.
No, exactly that. Just don't turn into a stalker.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't be doing that. Yeah, that's
Well, it
probably
is.
illegal.
Yeah, no, exactly that. But no, let me hit the recording button. That was a good one. 1 second.